I'm here today with the game Hadrian's Wall, which is a flip and write in the family of roll and write games where you're solving a puzzle competitively with other people and trying to figure out what you want to do as far as some combo building. But it's a competitive game for 1 to 6 players that plays in around an hour. It was designed by Bobby Hill. It's published by Garphill Games and Renegade Games, and it has artwork by Sam Phillips. In the game, players will compete to build the best wall and the best Roman society in England to keep the Picts out physically and culturally. Let's take a look at how to play the game, and then I'll come back and share my final thoughts related to the gameplay and the setting. Each player will start with one of each of these 2 massive sheets that look overwhelming at first, but are actually quite straightforward once you get used to it. More on these in a minute. Then give each player an easy to set up player board, assemble it, make a common area off to the side of resources, soldiers, builders, servants, and citizens. Decide on a difficulty, which is shown here in these pendants, green, yellow, and red. Green for easy, medium for yellow, and red for orange. And place the fate deck with the Picts back on it here in the middle of the player area. I'm actually going to set up for the solo game and explain the game from there because there are very few rules changes between the solo game and the multiplayer game. One thing that you're going to do though is if you're playing 2-player, you're going to get a player deck and set it up with 1 card coming out each year from the top of it. If you're playing solo, 2 cards will come off the top of it for each year. Each player gets one of these player decks, which shows a Roman commander on the back. I personally prefer the guy with the lion head. After all, if we were showing invaders taking over another culturally, both physically and socially, then might as well do the meta thing here. Flip the top fate card and start a discard pile. From there, you'll get resources and workers. In this case, 1 soldier, 3 builders, a servant, a citizen, and 2 stones. Every player will also start with 1 resource generation on their sheet, so take a stone for that. And then from the top of their deck, they're going to flip over 2 cards. In this case, I've already done it. And choose one to be a path card. I'm choosing the Vanguard for my path, which is victory points at the end, and a prospect card, which will go off to the right. From the prospect card, take a look at any resources that you might get, in this case, a servant and a resource, and place them with the rest of your resources to be used. Remember, every player starts with an additional resource. You can generate additional resources in the future by filling in these circles. You can also generate additional citizens, builders, and attributes. We haven't talked about attributes yet, but that's how you're going to score at the end of the game. Attributes include Renown, Piety, Valour, and Discipline. Alright, I said I would come back to the sheets, and we'll go ahead and talk about them now. There's some things that you should know about them as you fill them out. First of all, let's take a look at this top third here. There's really 2 things going on with the top third. The first is your defenses related to the wall, and then wall guards and some servants doing some things. And the second is these cohorts. The cohorts can be filled out in any order as long as you have a shield icon that you filled out elsewhere. Then choose one starting on the leftmost side, either left, center, or right. Fill out a box. You're done there. Usually what I do in my first 2 years is spend a lot of time on the fort and the wall and the sippy. As I fill those things out, that'll give me combos to do other things that are important for the Roman society that I have, and then later on for some of the other things. But as you fill it out, let's take a look at it. In order to build the fort, you need soldiers or builders. You need resources to build the wall and sippy, that's the pokey sticks in front of the fort. And if you want to build one of these sections, check to see if it is connected to the fort section below with the chain attached. You must first build connected fort sections before building connected wall and sippy sections. To do the wall guard, you need soldiers or this sword icon. To do mining and foresting, you need servants. In addition, you can only do your first left third as long as you only have a small granary. Once you've finished everything on the left third, you can begin the middle third after you fill in the medium granary. That takes a servant, a builder, and a stone. The same is true for the right third. You need to build your large granary, which can only come after you've built your medium granary, and you need, again, a servant, a builder, and 2 stone before you can build anything in that right third. Again, this doesn't apply to the cohort. The cohorts are a completely separate part of your defense. Here's what you need to know about both sheets as you learn to fill them out. Look for chevrons. Chevrons on the left side of any box are a requirement. Going back to our fort example, I can either use a builder or a soldier to fill out one section of my fort. This is a chevron. The / is always an or, not an and. Pluses are ands. White squares that you fill in may give you bonuses or be blank. These are the main engine of your game though, the white squares. There's also solid circles. Solid circles have to do with resource production, getting additional citizens or builders, or getting those additional attributes. There's also dotted line circles, and we'll come to those in a minute. But for now, think chevrons, white squares, solid circles. White squares with a hashtag or £sign must be filled in with the number of the year you did that action. These are once per year actions, except for the baths. And that's because that's where all the wheeling and dealing went on. So they get 2 of those per year. You still have to fill in the year that you did them. If you see a hanging pendant, this is a requirement of how many in the relevant field of citizens, as shown by the sign next to it, must be filled out. For example, in the small precinct, if I want to get that, I must first have 3 trader sections filled in. Then I have to spend a servant and a citizen before I get the benefits on the right. Any symbols in white squares are going to be benefits. That's important for filling out your combinations. To reiterate, chevrons are requirements. White squares, you fill out those to gain bonuses. And circles usually give you yearly bonuses. There's 2 main exceptions to all this. Look for the hashtags, that's the $signs. These are year limitations to filling out white squares. Or the hanging pendant. These are required on the citizenry tract on the left side of your right sheet. There's one other exception, and this is mainly to do with how you play the multiplayer or 2-player or single-player game. As I mentioned before, in a single-player game, you're going to set out a player deck of which you'll turn over 2 cards each year. In the 2-player game, you're only going to set out 1 of these cards. In the multiplayer game, you're not going to need that at all because you're just going to look to the people to the left or right of you. In a multiplayer game, if I want to use somebody's scout icons or their trading goods, I would just simply give the resource that I'm using for that. That's relevant to the market and to the scouting down here in the bottom right-hand corner. We'll talk more about those in a second, but suffice it to say that if I want to do those actions and I use my neighbor's card, my neighbor's prospect card, then I have to give them that resource. In a single player or 2-player game, that's going to determine how many more fate cards that we will draw if I give that resource to the deck. Let's take a look at how we would sell goods. First of all, I would have had to build my market, which takes a servant, a builder, and 2 stone. Then I get a renown. Once I've done that, I can fill in any hexagon in here and get the bonus as long as I spend a resource and have the requisite number of trader level filled out. I can also only fill out a number 1 time. If it's my first, second, or third time filling out a unique number, I get a single renown. If it's my 4th and 5th, I get 2 renown. And then on my 6th, I get 3 renown. If I am going to do the scouting, I need to make sure that I have patricians. Once I have a certain number of patricians, I can fill out scouting and do a little mini polyomino game. That's what these shapes are for. Filling out those will give me either additional resources or servants. Let's go ahead and talk about those dotted line circles. There's 2 types. One has to do with disdain, which we'll come back to in a minute when we talk about the Picts attacking. The second one is favors. Favors appear in the small temple, medium temple, and large temple. It should be noted that I have to fill things out in order, small, medium, and large, or from small to large in the case of the gardens. I can't just skip around with those. Now, with the favor, once I get that bonus, I fill in the circle around it, and then I have a favor that can block a card for when the Picts attack. In the case of the diplomats who grant 2 favor, I also have to decide which cohort they're going to grant their favor to. I can't change it once I've done it. After I've used all my resources to do as many actions as I can and to trigger as many combos as I can, then it's time for the Picts to attack for the end of the year. There's 3 things that could happen when the Picts attack. First of all, I will look at the year, and depending on the difficulty level, I will flip that many cards. In the first year, I'm flipping over 1 card no matter what. Then I will take a look at the icons in the left, center, or right. Whichever ones are filled out, that's where the Picts are going to be attacking. In this case, the Picts are attacking my left cohort. If I had at least 1 square filled out, because I'm equal to or greater than their attack, I defend. And I would gain Valour based on the year in this gray pendant here. The second thing that could happen is that I might let some attacks through, but less than the gray number in the year flag. In this case, I would gain a combination of both Valour, which is on my attributes traits. Then you fill in this disdain for how many attacks you let through. Disdain is important because that's negative points at the end of the game. You can get rid of the disdain by visiting the baths and gaining bribes. Baths are related to the Apparitores, who are summoners for court. Some other rules that you might want to know as you get to playing the game. 1, again, the small garden has to come before the large garden. 2, temples must be filled out completely in order from small, medium to large. Diplomats only choose 1 cohort to defend, which seems a little situational. You may also miss the fact that to build a landmark, you need 15 points in the related attribute. There are a few things that I haven't talked about in this video, including the forum, final scoring, the theater, and gladiators. However, I believe that this game is very intuitive and easy to follow along with once you get going. I think I've given you the basics so that you can learn how to play the game and then enjoy it. So, can a game in the roll and write, flip and write category get much heavier than this? Mechanically, probably. Physically, probably not. And I like that. I like the components. I like that I'm feeling something physical, not just marking something off on a sheet. This game pushes the limits of the genre in a physical sense. And that's pretty good overall. However, there is a lot of tininess going on here. So if you have a hard time seeing things on a paper, or if maybe you struggle with like components and you have some colorblind stuff going on, the purple, black, and blue might not do well for you. I don't completely know why, except that it was probably cheaper that they didn't do different shapes for the soldier, the builder, and the servant. And it's a really just mechanically solid game. Now one of my favorite roll and write, flip and write games as far as how it works mechanically. But, and this might be a big but, there are some things to talk about with the game. Hadrian's Wall was constructed in the mid-2nd century. In fact, it's a really interesting part of the Roman Empire. It was a really interesting time with what was going on in the world. This was an empire that was expanding and growing and showing its strength in lots of different ways. And the wall really represented a lot of different things. In fact, one of my undergrad professors got into Roman history and became a history professor because of Hadrian's Wall that he visited when he was 10 years old. He later went on to the University of Chicago and then studied in England and the UK, finding out more about the Roman Empire there, and then also in other parts of Europe. It's really cool that way. And this game will make you think about some of those things, especially because even though I called these servants, the game rules take a paragraph to talk about the servants, the slaves. The slaves during the Roman Empire weren't just people of dark skin or light skin. It was more a socioeconomic thing and a thing to do with war and how they were controlling the empire. Not everybody could become a citizen. Not everybody could have all the rights that everyone else had. And slavery was a part of daily life. So when you play this, you're going to be aware of that, especially when you use the Apparitores and their baths and the courthouse. The name for Apparitores today might be something like a summoner for the court. And when you go to the courthouse, you get a bunch of these servants, these slaves that are generated, who eventually then turn into builders too, if you go that route. So it's something to think about, and it's not far off of what's going on in the game. That's pretty big thematically, I think. And as far as the setting, you're always thinking about that. Well, I could go get some more miners, but if I get more miners, then that's slaves, that's servant, that's people that are working really hard so these other people can have this good life that's going on over here. And the combos are interesting that way. And so as far as I'm concerned, I think that I'm going to go out and probably read some more Roman history and think about all that. But it might be something that bothers you, knowing that you are simulating in some ways the life of an oppressive culture that took over the world, where they didn't care much about the cultures that they were oppressing and taking over. So if that bothers you, if that's something that's going to be in the back of your mind, be aware of that. Also, this is a very much do your own thing game. As I mentioned, I taught the solo rules because there's very little difference between playing solo and playing multiplayer. The only restriction on multiplayer is the amount of space you have and the fact that it only comes with a few different decks. You could virtually play this with as many people as you want as long as you have the resources, which the game says are unlimited, and the decks for each player. I like that, but some people might be looking for more of a dudes on a map experience, especially since this is meant to simulate kind of the conflict culturally and in warfare between the Picts and the Romans. I can see how that might not appeal to some people, but for me, it was a really good game. I think that I am excited to share this with people who are interested and who want that type of experience and who want to have a discussion about a game afterwards. How many games do you really come out thinking, like, this is worth having a discussion and let's talk about it? I think that that's here both thematically and mechanically with what this game is doing. Any other things that I might think about this are, well, I want to play this game again, and I would play it again and again. In fact, after a few plays, I laminated my own sheets so that I wouldn't have to waste these sheets. 200 sheets sounds like a lot, but when you're playing it a lot, lamination is a little bit easier, and I will play this game again. I will share it with people again. I'll have conversations about this game. I'm looking forward to sharing this game. It's just different every time. It's enjoyable. The puzzle is enjoyable. And I think it's a well thought out game. Maybe it's for you. Maybe it's not. But thanks for watching. Happy gaming. And we'll catch you later.